What's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Weekly. I'm your host, Pee Wee the Plug, 1/4 through the wire, number one Knicks fan in the world, aka Mr. Know-It-All. And in today's episode, we're going to be ranking my personal top 10 shooting guards entering the 2021-2022 season. Last week, we did point guards. I don't think the shooting guard list will be as controversial as my point guard list. For those of you that may have missed it or forgot, I am the one who ranked Trae Young over Damian Lillard going into this season. Just based off what Trae did last year in his playoff run, I have him one spot above Dame entering this season. And that's a disclaimer I want to start off the video with. My top 10 position rankings for each position is based off of last year and then also trying to project what to expect from them in the upcoming season, but majority of it is based off what they did last year, and it's just a year-by-year ranking. It's not about what they did for career, because if that was the case, Russell Westbrook would be superior to any guard, you know what I mean, with the last decade he's had, but it's based off what they did last year. Around 70% of it is last year, 70 to 60%, or even 80, and then the last 20 to 30% will be based on a little bit of a projection of what I think or can guess what they'll do in this next upcoming season. So, with that being said, at 10, we're going to start off with a guy that's it's a little ironic and it's a little funny for day ones that he is on this list and that he is top 10, because years ago, my co-host on Through the Wire podcast, Mike, had this guy as a top 10 point guard, which was super premature at the time. At the time, it was a backup. So that was a big funny moment that a lot of people always reference when they talk about our show. But Terry Rozier is a name that I'm sure a lot of casual NBA fans would be shocked to hear as a top 10 shooting guard. But he does enter my list right at 10. Had an incredible season, in my opinion, with the Hornets. That's why they paid him handsomely. I think he meshes well with LaMelo Ball in the backcourt. I like it because it allows Terry Rozier to be aggressive, and I think when he's aggressive, he's at his best. He had some very, very big scoring nights for them. He took a lot of the big shots for them. I would assume that he would continue to play that big part and that role for them, especially with the exit of Devontae Graham. You do have Gordon Hayward, and I think having Terry Rozier there allows Gordon Hayward to be, that efficient, simple, good basketball player, and you don't put him in a situation where he now has to be this chucker or this number one option player, which Gordon Hayward is not really is. You know what I mean? Gordon Hayward is a guy that you want to just allow him to be exactly who he is, which is a guy who's going to be efficient. He's probably not going to ever take too many shots or force anything. He's going to let the game come to him, and I think that's where he thrives the best. You got LaMelo being this big playmaker, making all of these plays. You got Miles Bridges, energy, scoring, spurts, and alley-oops. P.J. Washington pick and popping. And then Terry Rozier is the guy who's like, I'll take the big shot. You know what I mean? Step back three, I'll take it. Out of a timeout, we down by one. I have no problem being that guy. I'll lead us in shot attempts if we. And I think every team needs that, and he's allowed to do that with the Hornets. Previous teams and situations, he kind of was boxed. I hate to use the word leash because these are grown adult men, human beings we're talking about, and not dogs, anything. But, his leash wasn't as long with the Celtics. He was a little bit more contained. But with the Hornets, they allow him to be exactly who he thrives as, and that's an aggressive shot maker and shot taker. And like I said, he had an incredible year. I think he's going to build on that. He kind of exceeded expectations last year for me, and I think if he can double down on that, this team is only going to be as as good as they mesh. And I think him playing that part allows LaMelo to be who he is, allows Gordon Hayward to be who he is, and everybody else falls in line, and it makes them even better than I think we all know. They in my opinion, have a legitimate chance to be a play-in to 8th seed in the East with that young, fun team that they have in New Orleans. So Terry Rozier is at 10 for me. At 9 is C.J. McCollum. Now, C.J. McCollum is an interesting case because we all know talent-wise, skill-wise, C.J. McCollum can climb up this list. He is a guy who's previously been high on this list, but based off last season, for various reasons, he slipped, right? Because when you look at the top of the shooting guard list, it's extremely exceptional. So it sounds a little weird to have CJ at 9, but when you look at the guys that are above him, you kind of see that, man, the shooting guard list is stacked. There's some guys out here in that shooting guard position who are coming with it. And it makes guys like CJ, who have flirted with all-star appearances, who's averaged, high 20s before, who's hit big shots. And you can see why CJ hasn't yet made an all-star game, because this position is stacked and it keeps getting better and better and better. And last year was a tough year for CJ. He started off on fire or whatnot. Then around January, he had the injury. And then he came back in the middle of March. He played March, April, May. They start the playoffs, and the playoffs was just not good for him. Off-season interviews, he talked about the injury and the effect that it had on him in the playoffs. But the matter of the fact is that he played. Him and his team played against a team who was down a starter and second best player, Jamal Murray, and they lost. And part of the reason why they lost has to do with CJ McCollum's performance. Now, I'll take the injury with a grain of salt, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But it happened, and all of his numbers dropped significantly, from points to the percentages. Just struggled. Had a very, very tough playoffs. And because of that, it resulted in his team getting a premature exit in the playoffs, where they looked to kind of be the favorite at that moment. And his teammate Damian Lillard tried his best to carry them through, and he just needed a little bit of help, and it didn't come through. And again, I believe that CJ McCollum isn't defined by that playoffs. I know the type of player and skill set that he is. If we put him in some other situations, maybe he flourishes. If his dynamic duo partner, or if he was the Robin to a big man and he can control the perimeter game, and maybe it's not him and Dame both trying to share 20-plus shots out of the backcourt, in the small miniature backcourt, maybe his performances will be different. Maybe we put him in some of the other situations that some of these other shooting guards in, maybe his numbers are better. We can always say that. But based off last season, what I've seen, and in comparison to the other guys that are above him, I think 9 is almost perfect and ideal for CJ McCollum. Again, there are some heavy hitters above him, but I won't doubt him in saying that there's no way he can move up. Now, I do believe there's a cap. I don't think CJ McCollum, when I see the other names on my list, that he can I don't think he can hit that top 5, maybe even 6. But I think he can get higher than 9 if he can stay healthy, if he can stay consistent, and if he can put everything in full display. And some point, that Portland Trailblazer team is going to have to break up, and one way or another, a new role for CJ or a new dynamic would maybe, shed some more light on him, or give him more opportunity to do things that we haven't seen him yet do, just because it isn't his role. But at 9, I think CJ McCollum is perfect. And like I said, it's tough, because the guys that I have higher than him are legit, and I don't think he can go way up there. But I do think there is some chance in the world where CJ McCollum could move up to an 8 or a 7, depending on how the upcoming season goes. So at number 9, we have CJ McCollum. At 8, we have a young guard who has gotten better in almost every single year he's been in the game, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Had a really nice year last year, but there are some things in place with Shai that kind of are pros and cons. One of the pros is that he's on a young team, so he's allowed to do his thing. He's allowed to play, shoot up a lot of shots, really put his full game on display in front of all of our eyes to watch and say, man, that young man has game. We all are awake and know that Shai is emerging and he is getting better. He was like a solid rookie point guard on that Clipper playoff team. Okay, and then he boosted up into a scoring guard in that second year with OKC next to Chris Paul. And then he was leading them last year. They kind of played better than we expected out of the gate. And then he got shut down. And that's the con to playing with the Thunder, which is a team that's rebuilding. They're a bit young. And it's hard to judge what they're going to do in the foreseeable future. But they have so many draft picks that they want to capitalize on that they're not. It's going to be tough to imagine seeing Shai be put in position to where he can really, really do his thing or play meaningful basketball in a while. And I think that's important because a lot of the other guys, almost every guy above him played in the playoffs. The only guy that I have above him that didn't play in the playoffs was Zach LaVine. And Zach LaVine, I'm almost sure, is going to play in the playoffs in this upcoming season. And I'm not the guy who says empty stats and saying Shai can't be a winning player. But with his newfound role, I would like to see him play in those circumstances. We saw with the OKC team with Chris Paul, Schroeder, but then that team kind of went away, and now he's like the full-blown best player on his team, and he's taking his game to new heights. And we may only see him for like 40 games a year because when the team is rebuilding, they sit guys. Guys miss games due to injuries that probably wouldn't make them miss games if they were in the middle of a playoff run. So that's the tough thing with Shai is how much will he be able to show us on a consistent basis without the Thunder coming in and messing it up. But then the pro is that he can shoot up all the shots. It's his team. He can work on things while playing and fully develop. And he has the keys to that. Everything is going to go through him. But like I said, the other part is how much of Shai will we see? Will it be enough for him to make an all-star game? Will anybody take what he's doing serious compared to some of the other guys? Because you got to understand, Shai may have a 38-point night, and his team may lose by 16 or 17 points. And in this league, they really value winning, as they should. But I do think certain circumstances, we have to start understanding that it ain't because the player isn't good, but it's like Devin Booker. Devin Booker lost all those years and they threw out empty stats, but at the minute the guy played in the playoffs, he showed his ass because he always could hoop. And that's always been my thing against the empty stats things. It's not against the player at times. It's just the situation. So I hope that we can see Shai at full display and we won't see him shut down or missing games, not playing back-to-backs, because I do think the guy is special. And because he does get better every year, I'm super excited to see what he brings to the table this year, with another year under his belt. So at 8, we do have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. At 7, we have Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, like a lot of guys that I'm going to start to talk about, is another guy where 7 feels low. I'm really extremely high on Jaylen Brown. I was a guy that was extremely critical with his last contract situation where he was like demanding this and he wasn't budging. And I was like, man, Jaylen, you chill, man. You just get your money. And then he shut me up because he got that deal and he played his ass off. Almost a 25-point score. Fits very well next to Jason Tatum. Two-way player. I know it's crazy to say two-way because you're supposed to play both sides of the basketball, but he plays both sides of the basketball at a high level. And I think they're going to have a good year in this upcoming season because it's going to be Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And then everybody else is going to play their role. But over the last few seasons, Kyrie leave. They bring in Kemba. Kemba is supposed to be this all-star guard. They're trying to feature him in, and they're relying on him to be a part of something. And then when he plays, it's like we got 3 guys we got to share the ball with, and how does this work? We're super isolation heavy. Then Kemba misses, 30 games that we didn't expect to happen, and now Jaylen Brown is hurt. I think now you have a new coach. Brad Stevens is in the upper office. You come in and you understand that it's a totem pole of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and everybody else play your part. And I think they'll be better because of that and because they'll know this is our team. This is what we have. They won't have to deal with, will Kemba be available? As good as Kemba is, there has been the injury problems with the knee in Boston, and I don't think they got the real full package of Kemba the same way they experienced with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. The guys and the stars, quote-unquote, max players that they've brought in Boston over the last 4 or 5 years never could really stay healthy. And I think this time with these 2 young wings, it'll be a different story because they'll know exactly what they're working with, exactly who their guys are, and they'll have a pecking order that will help them. And I think they'll have a very, very good year. And I think Jaylen Brown will be one of the reasons. And I think he can compete for an all-star slot. It's going to be loaded out east because you have Kyrie, Harden, Durant, you know what I mean? But I do think he can compete for a spot. And I would not be surprised if next year I do this list and he's a lot higher than 7, because a part of the reason he is 7 is because he didn't play in the last playoffs because he was hurt, and some of the other guys were able to use that time to, make a little bit of a case to put themselves higher. But Jaylen Brown is the real deal, in my opinion. And if anybody was out there to be traded, if there was a star, you got Dame, the Ben Simmons situation, Jaylen Brown is somebody I want back. He's the guy that I'm calling around. Hey, Boston, you want a star? Because I would love to have Jaylen Brown back. That's just my personal thing. On to number 6, Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls. Zach LaVine is the only player on this list who hasn't played in the playoffs. I know I talked about Shai playing with the Thunder, but Shai did make the playoffs with the Clippers his rookie year, and then following the next season with OKC Thunder when they had Chris Paul, Gallinari, Adams, Dennis Schroeder. That team made the playoffs as well. Zach LaVine is the only guy who hasn't. The Chicago Bulls have had probably the best offseason, bringing in Lonzo Ball, bringing in DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, Derrick Jones Jr. is now off that bench. They had the midseason trade of bringing in Nikola Vucevic. You still got Patrick Williams, Kobe White, and then Zach LaVine. So I'm hoping and I'm guessing that the Chicago Bulls some way, somehow will be in the playoffs. What seed they will be, I am not even close to being able to guess that, but I do feel confident in saying they will make it. And I'm excited to see Zach LaVine play playoff basketball. He's been one of my guys as he played at UCLA, and I think he's the longest tenured player in the entire league to not play playoff basketball yet in his career. And I think the same thing with Devin Booker. He's not an empty stats player. I just think he's been in some peculiar, tough situations where he's missed out on playoff basketball and playoff success. But now you put him in this position, and when he does make it, I don't think he's going to be anything less than what we expect or what we've already seen. This is a guy who can win you a game alone. This is a guy who just played Olympic basketball and took on the challenge of stepping up in some of the flawed areas that he has, which is taking responsibility on the defensive end. His playmaking has took a big jump over the last couple of years, because he used to be a guy where he gets that ball and he has tunnel vision. He has one sight and one sight only, and that's on the basket, and it's whatever is in between him and the basket, he's trying to get past to get there. Now, over the last few years, he's learned to make an extra pass, learn to make better decisions when he collapses a defense, double teams, pacing himself off pick and rolls, decision making, trusting his teammates. And I think now that he has even better teammates, we can see more of that. And his numbers may take a little dip because he's playing with a lot of better talent across the board, but I still think impact wise, big time shots, big time performances when it matters the most, he will still be there to deliver for the team. And I will not be surprised if he is NBA and All-Star. This dude is the real deal. I believed in him, like I said, since I seen him at UCLA. Ask anybody that knows me, they'll say the first time hearing about Zach LaVine was probably from me. And then the dunk contest, when I seen him be a 20-point scorer behind, as a third option behind Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, I knew that this dude was the real deal. Tough start to his career because they were trying to, out there in Minnesota, turn him into like this point guard, Russell Westbrook 2.0. But as soon as they put that man in his real position, shooting guard, and allow him to be that, he flourished. And boy, the Bulls stole one when they traded him for Jimmy Butler and acquired him instead of Andrew Wiggins, because I think Zach LaVine has star potential in this league. That guy is the real deal. Won't be surprised if he jumps up either, with the Bulls making the playoffs and he potentially having some crazy, outstanding big games and big shots. But at number 6, we have Zach LaVine. Number 5, speaking of playoffs, this guy is one of the best playoff performers on this list, in my opinion. That's Donovan Mitchell. I swear, Donovan Mitchell is like one of the best players to watch when it comes playoffs. He is big time. He is ready to make all of the shots. He puts an amount of pressure on defenses that I just haven't seen, and at certain times he seems unstoppable. He has this quick hesitation where he puts you in a position to where you either approach and contest the shot, and he beats you because he's so quick, athletic. He's gone in a blink of an eye. Or if you're scared of the drive and you sag or give him any space, not even sag, but give him any breathing room, he has the ability to be lights out from behind the arc, and in one motion, he's pulling up in your face, and it's incredibly dangerous. We saw his impact on the Utah Jazz A lot of conversation about him or Rudy being the best player because of the impact that Rudy brings defensively. We saw with the Clippers kind of taking Rudy out of the game that impact can be neutralized. But one thing that can't be neutralized is Donovan Mitchell's impact with his scoring and the amount of pressure he puts on the opposing team's defenses on every single play, every single night. And, that first round against the Grizzlies stole one without Donovan. He had to come back and kind of save the day. And the rest of the series looked really close, even with him back, because he was hurt and he was trying to sit out as long as he could. But after losing game one, he came back and put his cape on. And it showed that Utah really needs Donovan Mitchell more than they need anybody else. And because he's always ready when the lights come on, Donovan Mitchell is a top 5 shooting guard in this league. And I wouldn't be surprised if this dude jumped up. This is a part of the list, 6-3, where it can be some dropping, it can be some topping. All of these guys are this close to each other, and it's separated by just an inch. And Donovan Mitchell is like that to jump up significantly at any point. He's the real deal. Donovan Mitchell at number 5. Man, I can't say enough about the guy. At number 4, we have a prolific scorer, a guy who can score with the best of them, and I think has let it be known that he's just as good of a scorer as any other shooting guard on this list. And that's Bradley Beal out in Washington. Bradley Beal has been in a significant situation with Washington. A lot of people around the league as fans and, viewers, we want to see him request a trade. You know what I mean? We think Bradley Beal deserves better and whatnot. And things have been tough in Washington, especially with John Wall exiting and whatnot. But I respect and admire him, being willing to stick it out and continue to stay loyal to his organization and whatnot. But even with that, they were able to get an 8th seed spot, win a play-in game, and partly because of that is him and Russell Westbrook. You now have a new situation where Russell Westbrook is gone. You bring in Spencer Dinwiddie, and I think they did a very good job and had an underrated offseason by filling out their roster. You know what I mean? As good and dynamic as Russell Westbrook is, there's certain things that come with Russell Westbrook. You know what I mean? And I think you pull that out. You put in Spencer Dinwiddie, who should be solid and consistent. You bring Kyle Kuzma in the mix. Whether you start him, bring him off the bench. You bring in KCP, a veteran wing defender. You bring in Corey Kispert, who should be, an above-average shooter from day one. You also bring in Aaron Holiday from the Pacers as a backup guard. You have Daniel Gafford. You have Montrezl Harrell now off the bench. Hopefully Thomas Bryant can get healthy. You still have Bertans. There's a lot of different things on that team that I think is going to make Bradley Beal even better. It can open up some playmaking doors. You still have Rui Hachimura. How could I forget a guy that I think could be in the most improved player conversation? And I think you have a lot of moving pieces to play a lot of different styles of basketball. They can play big. They can play small. They can play fast. They can play half court. Bradley Beal can facilitate. Bradley Beal can score. He can ISO. He can come off screens. There's a lot of different styles and brands of basketball that this team will be able to play. And I think that only makes Bradley Beal better. For him to play with the team that he played with last year and do the things that he's done, or even a year before, this to me is one of their better, well-rounded rosters that they've put together over the last few years. And I think he can only benefit from it. And if they can stay healthy, they can be even better than they were last year and get themselves back into the playoff mix and potentially give somebody a run for their money in the first round. But again, this is the part of the list where everything is close. And I'll say if Bradley Beal played on a team like Utah, there's no doubt in my mind that he wouldn't do the same things that Donovan Mitchell is doing. If he had a team, or when he gets a team like Devin Booker has got over the last few years, finally in Phoenix, there's no doubt in my mind Bradley Beal could do some of the similar things. When it was him and John Wall in those playoff series, Bradley Beal was a big part of those teams and those games. You know what I mean? Eastern Conference Finals against who did they play against? They played against somebody, not the Eastern Conference Finals, the semifinals. And I believe John Wall broke his hand against the Hawks or something. They had the series against the Celtics when IC had the big game, you know what I mean, to go in to the Eastern Conference Finals to play the Cavs. That's what it was. Even then he was doing this thing. But now as the number one player, number one option, lead leader in scoring. This is a different Bradley Beal. So again, situations is a big part of it, which is why a lot of people want Bradley Beal to request a trade to get into a different new situation where he can play on, a better team with better players around him. I wouldn't be mad if he was able to go somewhere like Atlanta, team up with Trae Young, John Collins. They got a lot of young talent over there that they would be able to maybe give to Washington. Hunter, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, Herter, Bogdanovic, Jalen Johnson now. They got some things over there. Capella, because you now have a Kongwu. Come on, Atlanta, Washington, listen to me. I'm giving y'all some shit. Bradley Beal, Trae Young in the backcourt in the East. Still got John Collins, a Kongwu. You know what I mean? They're not trading all the young wings. Somebody stays. If you give Hunter and Herter, Cam Reddish got to stay. Come on. That's all I'm saying. Bradley Beal at number 4 for me. At number 3 is where I have my boy Devin Booker. Devin Booker, incredible year. I think that's just ideal with a lot of these other guys like Zach LaVine, like Bradley Beal, like Shai when he gets his chance. That's what you want to see. You want to see these guys do everything they're asked to do, even when they're playing on bad, shitty teams, and continue to find ways to get better, continue to put up numbers, continue to compete. And then as soon as the opportunity comes to make the playoffs, to be a part of a great team, nothing changes for them. They still deliver because this entire time they've been getting themselves ready for this moment or these moments throughout the playoffs, so nothing is new. And that's why I never understand the empty stats argument. What is a player supposed to do? Because his team bad, he's supposed to suck too, or he's supposed to not score? These guys still have to get better and still have to get ready for when their time comes, and that's what Devin Booker did for so many years. And you can see the grind pay off, and it was a sight to see. I think he'll double down on that run that they had. I think he'll double down on what he did coming off the Olympics, playing around a bunch of great players, getting cosigns from guys like Kevin Durant, Drew Holiday, winning the gold medal, having some playoff success and success in general, knowing that he belongs, hearing himself be compared to Kobe, even though he got to shoot that down, is still good things to hear and build on. And I think this dude can fight for that number 1 spot in the years to come. Devin Booker is the real deal. And he still showed, like I mentioned about Zach LaVine, when your team get better, some stat categories, statistics may go down. But the overall impact that I bring is still going to be felt, and it's still going to be viewed as valuable because I make winning basketball plays. I still make the big shots. I still take the big shots. I'm still here on a consistent basis. Those are all the things that are important and that are crucial, especially for the shooting guard position, which is why I have Devin Booker at number 3 and why I wouldn't be surprised if this young man moved up and over the next few years, he at some point took the crown as the number 1 shooting guard in the league. I'm just telling you. At number 2, we got Paul George. Last season and last playoffs were extremely important for Paul George. Coming out of the bubble, a lot of things were said about him, negative, rightfully so in some sorts. I think people took it too far and started to make it unfair for Paul George. But the criticism that he did face after the bubble was just. It was just. He played poorly. The Clippers did a lot of talking, and they failed miserably. They blew a 3-1 lead. And part of it was him and Kawhi, and they deserved some of the backlash, even though he got like 80 to 90% of it. I think he did a good job bouncing back, and the best part of it was the fact that he was able to do it with Kawhi out. Nobody, of course, wanted Kawhi to be hurt or wished that upon him, but for him to go out, it then made the Clippers an underdog. It made everybody say, well, they're definitely going to lose now because all you have is Paul George. And Paul George answered the call because the entire world was waiting and watching and waiting for him to fail to say, hey, look, told you, Paul George, that's the guy from the bubble. George Paul, he's not clutch, he's not this, he's not that. But instead, he silenced the doubters, went on the road with a relatively young team, and they were able to escape and move on into the Western Conference Finals and compete for a chance to play in the finals. And I think he can build on that, take that into the season, because Kawhi, again, won't be there for the start of it. And a lot of people in conversation, if you look in the basketball world, are saying this dude could potentially have an MVP conversational season where the Clippers are still successful. They still win games. And they still thrive even without Kawhi, but because Paul George. And you look at not only his scoring, his playmaking, they ran the offense through him, his decision-making, when to go, when to not, being a good teammate. You listen to Reggie Jackson crying after they lost in the playoffs saying, hey, man, Paul George brought me here. Leadership. Those are all things that don't show up on the stat sheet, but that is felt in the locker room and is important along with the play. And if Paul George can do those same things that he showed in the playoffs, he could potentially be in the conversation. Not that he'll win it, but just in the conversation. And it's nice to see him back at number 2. Because again, after last year and some of the low moments they had during the season of last year, a lot of people were low on Paul George. And I feel like he's brought them back. And this season could put him back to being respected at a high level and viewed as a high-level player again, because Paul George has a lot of quality basketball left in the tank. It's going to be very interesting and exciting to see what he does in his upcoming season without Kawhi for a big part of the first half. At number 1 is the guy that's head and shoulders above everybody, and that's James Harden. James Harden reigns supreme over the shooting guard position. He's number 1 by far, not close. It's been that way for years now. If Klay Thompson was healthy, he wouldn't contest James Harden at number 1. That's why when I said Devin Booker number 1 shooting guard, I said in a few years, James Harden he's just different. And the fact that he's playing on Brooklyn and is still being the James Harden from Houston says exactly why he's number 1. This is a 30-point scorer on any given night. He's also a shooting guard who you can run your offense through as a point guard, and Brooklyn does decide to run him as a point guard. And I think that's the missing link that Brooklyn needed, and now allows nobody to take a back seat. KD and Kyrie were never going to be the playmakers or the point guard. They both want to score. And that's why when James Harden came in, Kyrie said, hey, you run the show. Let me be shooting guard. I can do what I do. I don't have to sacrifice nothing to change my game. KD's never going to do that. Why would you ask one of the greatest scorers, if not the greatest scorer of all time, to sacrifice any shot attempts? So then you bring in James Harden. You still have Joe Harris over there who can catch and shoot off the pick and roll when James Harden is going downhill and drawing fouls and ones, throwing lobs to big guys. And now he can kick it out to Joe Harris or KD and Kyrie. It's the missing link, and he's ultimately why the Brooklyn Nets are, to me, the favorite, easily, at full health. This is the guy that when he came over there in Brooklyn, people forget he had a stretch, but he was looking like the MVP. He came to Brooklyn and made them better. Now, don't get me wrong, Kevin Durant is their best player, but from an impact stance and what he does for them, he unlocked every single box that they had locked still in Brooklyn. If there was any doubt, James Harden took the key of doubt and opened it and said, no way in hell this is going to fail. Not with me here. And that's why James Harden is the number 1 shooting guard in the league. That's my top 10. That is my top 10. If y'all have any disagreements, anybody that wasn't mentioned that you think should be mentioned, anybody misplaced to you, let me know in the comments. I want to see y'all full list, by the way. Don't just tell me that you think Jaylen Brown should be number 2 because you're a Celtics fan. I want to see where he should be, why he should be there, what's wrong. Put it all in the comments. Y'all know I love dialogue. If it's some good ones or it's enough to make me get riled up to respond, I'll react to some of y'all's that y'all leave in the comments. If you're new, subscribe. Please leave a thumbs up and a like for your boy. This is NBA Weekly. I am Pee Wee the Plug. All love as always, but I am out. Peace.